Good morning, everyone. I'm Hina Baloch. Welcome to this beautiful literary constellation in Washington, D.C. General Motors and Cadillac are proud patrons to be here at the National Book Festival. While we call this stage the science fiction stage, in our attempt as humans to categorize and simplify what must remain complex, I've often wondered why the world of so-called science fiction is so male-dominated, is so homogeneous, is so fixated in one geography, one race, and one version or view of history. Where, as a result, the narrative has also become simplistic, divided into good and evil, where the evil is often aliens attacking the planet Earth, and the good is often a white male trying to protect and be the savior of the victims, often women, children, and people of color that must need rescuing, of course. So in an attempt to dismantle, decolonize, and diversify speculative fiction, General Motors has launched a program called the Future Fiction Collective, where we want to bring, with the objective of wanting to bring stories from the writers of tomorrow, writers of the future. And the writing of the future should not be limited to one worldview, should not be limited to one race, should not be limited to one geography, and it should be diversified. And the stories of the future, the utopian, dystopian stories of the future, should not be told with a single lens. As a forever follower and a believer of Octavia Butler, I believe that change is coming. And as she would say, change is the only constant. Change is God. As I have the stage here and I have the attention of all of you, I would also like to draw your attention to the floods that are happening in Pakistan right now, my country of origin, where some 1,100 people have died and about 33 million people have been displaced. We're looking at a world where we'll be having a new category of refugees called the climate refugees. And I wonder, as I've read Ursula Le Guin in the past, in the 60s, where she predicted and where she called it ecological imperialism, on how we got here, what got us to a point where we stopped caring about the planet Earth. And I wonder if the science fiction and the cli fiction of the future would be able to predict a better utopia for the world. I would leave with some optimism from Ursula Le Guin's science fiction of the 60s, and I would also leave with one poetry from an Iranian-American poet called Kaveh Akbar, and he says, "Mahar cheez ra bayad dast dade bashim az dast dadim," which means that we have lost whatever we could have lost, and now it's time for us to act and imagine a new and different future. I'm also very pleased to welcome our very honorable speakers here, Victor Manibo and Rob Hart, for a session that's being moderated by Miwa Masur. Thank you.
I have to tell you, this time is going to fly. If you were not fully prepared for how fast this panel is going to go, it tells me you may not have read The Paradox Hotel or The Sleepless Bed. And if that's the case, you're in for a treat. If you have read the books, you're still in for a treat because we're going spoiler-free in this conversation. I think we can agree.
I'm going to try.
There's too much good stuff. There is way too much good stuff in both of these books. But before we start, I want to ask you guys, you have been friends for more than a minute. And I want to start here because I think it does inform a little bit of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. I think the way we met was pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to start that?
2019, I want to say. Yeah, we were part of this mentorship program called Pitch Wars. He was my mentor, and I am his mentee. And it was kind of like, think of The Voice, where you audition for like various mentors, and hopefully you get picked. And Rob picked me and my manuscript, The Sleepless.
It was so cool because it was the first year that I was doing it, and it's essentially, anyone can submit books to this thing, and I think I got like 140 submissions and had to kind of cull through them, and Victor's just immediately shot to the top of the list. I don't think I actually seriously considered too many other people because it had everything that I wanted in a book, which was like this big hook and some great ideas and a fantastic character and really good voice. And I was like, yes, this is the book I want to work on. So I can say with complete honesty, from that moment to now, like I'm not surprised that we're now sitting here together being able to do this for your debut.
Thank you. And there was no question in my mind I was going to apply to be Rob's mentee. I had just read The Warehouse, which had just come out then, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I want to be doing. I want to be doing sci-fi that combines mystery as well, and also has a commentary on the world we live in, the system we live in. With The Warehouse in particular, it's about capitalism, and that was something that I also wanted to explore and did explore in The Sleepless. So I was like, yeah, it's Rob and nobody else that I want to mentor me, and I'm so happy that you picked me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm delighted that you picked each other. So, and I'm very happy to be here. But I do want to talk about world building for a second, because obviously when you're dealing with dystopian fiction, or what do we want to, I mean, are you technically sci-fi?
Wow, that's a question that I myself keep asking myself, because it is a little bit dystopian in that it does occur in the future. The Sleepless is set in 2043 New York, and it is a little bleak, but it's not, apocalyptic. At least, there's still a lot of institutions that are in place, and most people are still living, somewhat decent lives. But it's difficult, and it does have a lot of dystopic elements, such as the surveillance state or income inequality and the overreach of corporations, which are elements of a lot of dystopian fiction. I guess you could call The Sleepless a little bit dystopian. Some people have called it cyberpunk or biopunk, and the fact that it has a mystery also kind of makes it hard to categorize. But yeah, I think it all kind of checks those boxes.
Okay, Rob, Paradox Hotel. Can we call this a locked box mystery?
I don't know.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Genre labels make my head hurt, and I
Okay.
feel like honestly, and I think they're more useful for you who works at Barnes and Noble and for booksellers, but I think for authors sometimes I could say to me in a lot of ways it's a romance, which was my first time writing something about two people very earnestly in love with each other, and. So yeah, I don't know. I got nothing. But I see elements of that, and people have called it that, and I kind of like that idea of. I liked the idea of playing within a very confined space, just sticking everything in one building and just kind of seeing what kind of nonsense can happen.
So personally, as a reader and an interviewer, I don't love labels either, to be honest. I want to be told a good story. And I
Yeah.
want characters that I can attach to. And both of you have these casts. Okay, the dinosaurs I was not expecting. We're going to get to the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The dinosaurs are a spoiler, but we will get there. But I want to talk about the characters, because Jamie's voice and January's voice. Which one of you is going to start? Because I love these characters. I love these characters. I love their arcs, and I love their stories. And it's not about the labels.
Yeah, January was such a fun character to write, and look, there's certainly a little bit of my acerbic-ness in there, but yeah, it's, I was talking to someone about this recently. There's this weird sort of it's like the divinity in the process, because I spend so much time researching and planning and plotting, and I drew a map of the hotel with the rooms individually labeled, all 500 of them. I go nuts on this kind of thing, but I also was kind of struggling with who to tie this to, and then just one day just had this image of this woman stepping off an elevator wearing a boho hat, and she was just very sad. And I'm like, oh, her name is January, and she's the main character. And it's okay, cool, that's how this works. And she was such a fun vehicle to play with, because I'm a big fan of narrators that are sort of a little unreliable, and also processing a lot of their own stuff and just trying to bring them to a place of kind of empathy and kindness. And not that she's a bad person, but she's dealing with a lot of grief and she doesn't know how to process it. And at the end of the day, the book is about how hard it is to face ourselves. And it just felt like she was the best way to kind of portray that.
And I feel like Jamie shares a lot of DNA with January in that, Jamie is also processing a lot of trauma that kind of informed the choices that he made in the book. And that was really something that I keyed into before anything else, because I wanted this character to be able to tell and present the sleepless world with a bit of ambivalence. He is sleepless, but at the same time, we find him at a stage in his life where he kind of regrets the choices that he makes, or regrets the fact that he's sleepless, and also can find that I still like the fact that I'm sleepless, even though it's messing me up in serious ways. And so, like I was saying, it kind of reminds me of January as well. But then after that, after finding the voice of like kind of ambivalence and also regret, I needed to flesh this character out more and find what kind of like sexual identity and racial identity he has. And because this was my debut, this was the first book I had ever finished. And they keep telling you, right, what you know. What I know is how to be a queer man and how to be a Filipino. So Jamie is a Filipino bisexual man, and it was easy for me to kind of infuse the character of Jamie with my own experiences. I don't think that I would make the same choices that he makes in the book, but he does share a lot of, at least those traits in me, especially the traits or the experiences of being different. Jamie in this book is different because, not because he's queer or Filipino, which is a big part of his story, but the main thing that he grapples with is his being different because he's sleepless. And again, that informs a lot of the trajectory of what he does.
So both of you have built these extraordinary worlds. The Paradox Hotel did feel a little bit like the TWA Hotel at JFK, just a tiny bit.
That's exactly,
Okay.
that was my visual inspiration.
If you have a chance, it's totally worth staying there if you have an early morning flight.
Gorgeous place.
But it's trippy the way you have this landscape. And I love hearing that you did all of this research to figure out what's going on, because one of the things that I love about both of your books is the way you set up time and your characters' relationships to time. And you're particularly, Rob, playing three-dimensional chess as far as I can tell, because you've got time slipping. You've got characters moving through time in ways that we have not figured out yet how to do, so congratulations to you. But
Thank you.
Can we talk about time for a second? Because memory plays a very similar role with time in the way that these time slippages happen. So you guys are both sitting in these worlds where you've got to know what's happening, because ultimately this is all up to you. But you can't leave your characters hanging. So let's talk about world building for a second. Let's talk about how we do this, how you do this.
Well, I will say that like writing time travel was a little bit like eating White Castle, in that I was like, this is a great idea. And then like a little bit later, I'm like, nope, I made a mistake. Why did I do this to myself? Because when you get into the minutia of it, you're like, oh no, like none of this makes sense anymore. And I also set myself this challenge of like, I'm gonna write a time travel novel in which nobody gets into a machine and travels to a different point in time. Like really all the time stuff is a neurological condition. So I was already kind of like building myself these impediments right at the beginning. But I actually found that helped more than it hurt, because the more sort of rules you impose helps you streamline it, and then also helps you build some drama when you start breaking those rules.
Okay.
And with The Sleepless, I really had to be meticulous about timing, because it is a murder mystery where you have to track every little thing that goes on. And because it was told from a point of view of a character who doesn't sleep, I had to pretty much account for every single moment.
Right.
And if people have watched the TV show 24, it's kind of like that, right? I had to account for what is happening and where everybody is, not just the main character, but also all the other characters around him, which was, kind of a tricky balancing act. But at the same time, I also had to think about Jamie's perception of time, because he has, trauma and grief that he was dealing with, and that kind of influences whether or not, he's bored. And when he's bored, it feels like time is just everything is taking forever. And sometimes he just needs to meditate and shut his brain down, because he's a, journalist who has to deal with all these different things. He has to deal with a murder investigation in his job. And so sometimes his perception of time is just so muddy and clouded. So I think it was really important for me to give the readers a sense of well, this is what it's like for a person who's always on. Time doesn't feel like time in the sense that, oh, it just passes in the same way. So, yeah.
The thing, too, that I loved about what both of you did with time in the books, too, is that time is the first thing that gets really messy when you're grieving. It is the first thing that goes. You don't know what end is up. You don't know where. That is the first thing that goes. And the minute I realized you were using time to play with grief, you really had my attention. And obviously this happens very early in both of your books. But how did each of these books start for you? I mean, did it start with time? Did it start with the voice? Did it start with just an idea?
It started with me being really tired on a train ride from New Jersey to New York. I was on a trip. I was coming back home after spending the weekend with my family, and I had a pile of stuff to get done. And I thought, I wish I didn't have to sleep. And from that what if question, I had other follow-up questions.
Right.
Well, what if I didn't have to sleep? What would my body be like? What would my mind be like? And then I asked, well, what if the rest of the world didn't require sleep? What would the world look like? So that's really where it started, just me being tired and having a really long to-do list. And then asking follow-up questions. And then when I had enough questions of like, what if, I realized, well, this could be a book. Let me try and explore these questions in a book. And that's how it started out.
So when does Jamie show up for you then in that process?
Oh, well, Jamie showed up because I was thinking I needed to tell this story about the sleepless world from a certain point of view. And I needed that person to have, to be in it. He had to be sleepless. But I wanted him to have some sort of nuance as to how he feels about it. The rest of the world, or at least a lot of the characters, you can pretty much place them on, either they really like the fact that they're sleepless or they really dislike it. Jamie is kind of in the middle because of a lot of his experiences. He sees the good side, but now, at least at the point in the story where he sees, you know what, this is really bad. And because he is a journalist, I'm also able to look at it from a macro level, not just an individual experience of the sleepless, but a journalist looking at it from, well, what does capitalism look like when everyone is sleepless, or a big part of the population is sleepless? What does, what do governments look like? How do they regulate, or how do they deal with this new class of people? So that's why I landed on, he has to be a sleepless person who is kind of iffy on it, but he also has to have a job that allows him to take a bird's eye view of it and pursue the questions in the book, the mystery in the book.
Okay, but we could argue you were writing a pandemic novel before we were in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Emily St. John Mandel, you may know, had sort of done this as well. So
Right. Yeah. That was tough. That was
I
tough.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure. Rob and I were working on The Sleepless shortly before the pandemic. And this mentorship program that I was talking about, it ends with an agent showcase where I had to present my manuscript to industry professionals. And that was happening during the beginning of the pandemic. And the pitch is, part of the population is sleepless due to a pandemic. And when you see that in a pitch during an actual pandemic, but some people would be turned off, and a lot of people were. For those who've read it, you know that it occurs 10 years into a pandemic. It doesn't really deal with how the outbreak happens or the initial reaction. It's more like, how do these people deal with the new normal in their world? So at least it was pandemic adjacent. It's not really about the pandemic. And it made it a little more palatable to some industry professionals. And luckily, I got some champions who really believed in the book, even though it was literally about a pandemic.
So, Rob, Warehouse came out in August of 19.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And before that, you had been writing a single character mystery series.
Yes.
Okay. And now we're at the Paradox Hotel, and we've got January and the dinosaurs. I really liked the dinosaurs, by the way.
So every time I write a book, I come up with something that I feel like my editor or my agent is going to make me take out. And when I was pitching Paradox to my agent, I'm like, it's going to be a time travel story, and it's going to be about grief, but there's also going to be robots and dinosaurs.
Right.
And he was like, why are you doing this to me? And I was like, trust me, I'm going to make the dinosaurs work. And it was so satisfying when I sent him the book and he read it and was like, all right, you pulled it off.
The dinosaurs really were.
Yeah, I call them Chekhov's velociraptors.
Yes, and
Yep.
you are correct to do that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I do like about the dinosaurs too and what you do with them is this whole idea of you can travel in time and you can look, but man, you should not touch. You should
Yeah.
absolutely not touch. And it's a really great, I mean, this is a primary thing for most people when it comes to time travel, right? Like the butterfly effect, all of this kind of thing where it's like, oh, don't change the things in the past because very, very bad things will happen as a consequence. And I like the idea that you've got this very sly humor coming in the form of dinosaurs. But it makes it really clear you should not be touching. And again, it brings us back to time though,
Yeah.
and how you manipulate time. So can we talk about the world of the Paradox Hotel? I mean,
Yeah, you know, I mean, for me, I got the idea. Have you ever done Sleep No More?
Yes.
Does anyone know what Sleep No More is? Okay,
Same here.
well, a few people. It's an interactive theater experience in New York where it's like it's Macbeth essentially, but like you're in this big warehouse space and you can follow the actors around and all the audience members are wearing masks. It's a little weird, but it starts off in a hotel and then moves into all these different spaces where like all of a sudden you're in a psych ward, all of a sudden you're in a cemetery. And I was doing that and I got this idea like time travel hotel. It just popped in my head while I was doing that. And I went home and I wrote it down and I'm like, there's a day's work. And then it was just kind of, and it was one of those things where I come up with ideas all the time and they kind of sit there and will they develop into something? But I just kept on interrogating that and I was like, okay, like if we develop time travel, what would happen? It was like, well, it would probably be a scientific pursuit. And I'm sure eventually would be privatized because, you know, look at what's happening with space travel right now, where it was like it used to be NASA and now all these rich guys are getting in on the game. And they're trying to figure out ways to monetize it. And I'm looking into it, and there's actually a ton of ways to monetize space travel. Like the average meteorite that approaches Earth has like trillions of dollars in platinum in it. Like there's so many ways to make money off space. So of course that's what they're doing. And then I was like, well, if we invented time travel, of course a bunch of rich people would want to take it. But then of course they would want to like use it to their own advantage. And like that just turned into like this boulder like rolling down a hill. And then I just started getting all these other crazy ideas that kind of like, okay, and this is going to be set at a hotel where before you go and take your like super fancy pants, expensive tourism trip to like the first showing of Hamlet, you have to stay at the hotel. And then once I had that hotel, it was like, yep, done. This is a book now.
And both January and Jamie are, I don't want to say amateur detectives because, I mean, January is part of the whole travel authority, the time authority. And Jamie is a journalist, so it's not to diminish, you know, his sort of 9 to 5, as it were. But you do put your characters in positions where they are able to, shall we say, snoop around and figure out what's going on. But they also can't trust their memories. Neither of them can trust their memories, which is a device I happen to like as a reader. But as a writer, how do you keep track of the lies they're telling themselves?
Carefully.
I kind of don't keep track.
Okay.
It kind of adds to the ambiguity of it. And
Right.
like when somebody tells me, oh, I read this and like, you know, this is a little bit inconsistent, but I like it because it kind of informs me about Jamie's mental state. And I'm like, yeah, that's completely intentional. I meant to do that. But, you know, memory is just so fun to play around with on the base level of this is a first-person point of view character, and I want to be able to show kind of an unreliable narrator because that's always been exciting to me to read, especially in terms of like a mystery story where you can't really trust the person who is telling this story. So memory is automatically like, okay, well, we'll mess around with that. But at the same time, memory is something that Filipinos have kind of a slippery relationship with. And, you know, because I'm Filipino and I can't help but infuse my stories with my culture, I wanted to discuss, you know, the basics, you know, good food, Filipino food is in the book, but also the psychology of Filipinos and their like relationship with memory and how as a people, we've been told that like, oh, we are a very forgetful lot. We are told that we're resilient because we keep, weathering all these disasters and all these dictators. And for me, it's like, well, that's a function of us just forgetting the lessons of the past.
Right.
And this is something that Jamie learns too. He has this memory problem because of his grief, but also because of kind of his resistance to or inability to learn from what had happened before.
Okay. Rob, I know. How do we do this without? Okay, robots, dinosaurs, but the humanity of your characters really sits at the forefront of Paradox Hotel. When you're sitting down and you've got January, and it's so obvious, I mean, that moment where you're talking about the hat and everything, but you have to surround her with bad guys, and you have to keep the bad guys from looking like they're cartoon characters.
It's, I always go back to this idea that every villain is the hero of their own story, I mean, and those are the best villains. They're the ones who they're like, no, I'm right, and no one else understands that I'm right. And that's why it's so compelling to kind of play with these characters that just have so much power and so much influence and can kind of get away with anything. And it's, when I was writing The Warehouse, which is basically about like if Amazon took over like the entire world and you had to like live there in addition to working there. And I had two characters who I knew were sort of like going to be the mains and going to be stuck in like one of the gears in this warehouse machine. And the book didn't really come together until I brought in the owner of the company as a character. And I was inspired to write him after reading Sam Walton's autobiography. Who, Sam Walton, who the founder of Walmart, was an interesting guy because he, his autobiography, it's like very like, my employers are my family and we worked real hard and we got the job done. And it's like, yeah, but you're also the guy that when the Federal Minimum Wage Act was passed, split all your Walmarts into different entities so that you didn't have to pay the minimum wage, which is not a great way to treat your family. And yeah, it's just the way that these guys like build themselves as legends and into heroes, and it's like you actually destroyed a lot of people on the way to the top, and yeah, that is always a space I want to write in, which is why rich people are terrible.
So in other words, you're just both writing about the world we live in the exact moment. You're just playing with some of the details and
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a lot of fun.
Who doesn't want to play with the laws of physics? I do want to talk about writing for a second, though, and I set us up for you guys to talk about how you met and your relationship, but I do want to go back to the actual craft for a second, because there's a lot of thought that goes into the kinds of books that you write. You can't just sit down and sort of pound at the keyboard as much as you try to sort of make it sound like you do that. There's no way you do. You can't when you're building worlds, right? But Victor, when you and I were talking before we were setting up our sort of conversation for today, you mentioned George Saunders at Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which is, if you haven't read it, thank you very much, about Russian writers and short stories. And this has been a really big influence on you. And I want to talk about this book for a second because it's a really fun read.
It really is. And George Saunders, just as a writer, is one of my idols. He writes really well, really crisply, and he also plays in that space of like speculative fiction and literary fiction, which I really love. But Swim in the Pond of the Rain is his latest craft book, where he basically dissects a few Russian short stories from the 1800s. And that kind of might sound boring to some folks, but it was really interesting because it showed you how, or he showed you how you can be really efficient with words and how you can convey so many things in like 2,000, 1,500 words. And that's something that I think every writer can benefit from, whether you're writing short stories or even novels. With novels, I kind of think that you have a lot more runway to just go on and then like world build and like do character interiority. But at the same time, you have to grasp the reader's attention, and you do that by having really crisp, efficient words that convey a lot of meaning about the world and the character and the plot, all like firing on all cylinders at the same time. And George Saunders going through these Russian masters, we're talking about Gogol and Tolstoy, telling like morality tales from a different era in so few words, and telling it so beautifully just taught me a lot about how I should be writing my sentences and structuring my stories.
Rob, you've worked as a publisher, you've worked as a political consultant, you have worked as a journalist. I mean, so you're obviously pulling from lots of different parts of your life when you're working as a writer, but you've also taught writing. What have you learned from your students?
I think at the end of the day, I still consider myself a student in a lot of ways. Like, I hope to be a student until the day I die, because like I want to keep learning and keep growing. And one of the best things I get out of teaching people is that it makes me have to like sit down and actually interrogate my process and explain it, because so much of this stuff is just like, it's a gear that runs in your head that you don't really think about. It's like your heartbeat. It's like it's there, but you don't consider your heartbeat during the course of the day. But then when I have to sit down and say, oh, okay, like this is why I do this, because then it results in this, and then it leads to this, it's like, oh, cool, like I'm sort of revisiting my own process and I'm understanding it a little bit better. And then every student, I think, brings a sort of unique sensibility, in the sense that they'll look at the world in a way that's different from the way that I do. So I'm always interested in what other people have to say, or how other people view things, because it's just going to inform my own viewpoint and help me grow.
I have to say, I had a lot of fun with all of the different points of view you had in Paradox Hotel. And a lot of it, you like to zig when I thought you were going to zag, and I really appreciate that, because I don't like to be able to predict where a story's going to go. And Paradox Hotel is certainly nothing I'd ever really experienced before.
Well, thank you.
And that was really, yeah. Okay, did I mention the dinosaurs? I did mention the dinosaurs. But again, listen, we're talking about really big ideas here, though. You're talking about trauma, you're talking about grief, you're talking about capitalism, you're talking about corporations maybe having a little more wiggle room than we might like. But why can't we have fun when we're talking about all of this stuff? I mean, if we're always asking people to eat their cultural vegetables, they're not necessarily going to follow us down the rabbit hole, right?
Yes. No, I believe that very strongly, and I really think of what I do is when I'm making my daughter dinner and she wants mac and cheese, but she doesn't want broccoli.
Right.
It's like, okay, the broccoli is going in the mac and cheese. You're going to get your vitamins, but you're also going to get a palatable meal that's fun to eat. And that's the thing. It's like like when I wrote The Warehouse, I wanted to write like a book about why Amazon was terrible. And given my background in journalism, I probably could have written a pretty cool nonfiction book about it, but who would want to read it? Not to say that there's no value in nonfiction. There's a ton of value in nonfiction, but the thing about fiction is that it's an empathy machine.
Right.
It's the way that we can sort of like put ourselves in other people's shoes and really sort of feel and understand something. And that's so much more appealing to me, because it's gonna connect with people so much. And the amount of people who reached out to me after they said after they read The Warehouse, and they were like, I've completely rethought my relationship with buying goods now. I'm like, awesome. That's all I wanted to do.
But you also wanted to tell a story, right?
Exactly. I wanted to have fun. The first book that ever just completely knocked my socks off was Fahrenheit 451, which was it's a great little thriller, but it's also about media consumption.
Right.
And I remember reading that in high school and being like, I didn't know books could do this.
Right. What was the book that knocked your socks off?
Ooh, wow. There's a lot. Well, short stories were really like my first love.
Yeah.
And I loved Sherlock Holmes growing up. And going back to your earlier question about having fun, with The Sleepless, I wanted to explore themes of, our hustle culture and, the glorification of the grind and all that. But I had to have a mystery in there because it's fun for me and it's also fun for the reader. Like, I can't preach about capitalism without, opening the scene with a dead body that you kind of have to solve. Oh, what happened to this person? And so, yeah, that goes back to my roots, or like my first loves, which are these detective stories that just drew me in and transported me to a world that I really knew nothing about. I was reading those stories as a young boy in Manila, the Philippines, and like, turn of the century, or, 1900s England is like a whole different world for me. And I was just, wow, this is really cool. I was probably reading them at too young of an age, but I was immediately hooked.
Okay, so besides Fahrenheit 451, what are some of the touchstones for you?
I would say probably the biggest influence on me was Tom Spanbauer.
Oh, love him.
Right.
The boy who fell in love with the moon.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I believe In the City of Shy Hunters is the best New York novel ever.
Okay.
And I'm a snob when it comes to New York novels.
we're
I was
gonna
born
have
and
a
raised
separate
there.
conversation about that.
We're going to hook
We'll
up
do
about
that.
this, yes.
We'll do that.
But yeah, no, Tom Spanbauer was a huge influence on me. I actually got to take a workshop with him.
Oh, wow.
And he was an amazing teacher. I feel so lucky to have had that experience. Chuck Palahniuk was another writer who I've, since become friendly with, and he's a great guy, and I love his stuff. And Amy Hempel, who is a fantastic short story writer. And then, a lot of the sort of greats of like crime and mystery, because I worked in crime and mystery for a little while. I ran a small publishing company that put out mostly ebooks. It was like old books that it just didn't make sense to put them in print, but we could put them out as ebooks. And so I got into some deep places there with authors like, Charles Williams and Charlotte Armstrong, and just this great list of people who I'd never heard of before. And as I'm reading them, I'm like, there's so much to learn here.
Victor, who have you been reading lately?
Ooh, I've been reading a lot of graphic novels lately because I'm in promo mode and I need something pretty but also have really good stories. But lately, I've also read Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart.
Which is a brilliant. Love this book.
It's not speculative at all, but it takes place in 1980s Glasgow during a time of economic depression, and it's centered on, it's a coming-of-age story about a gay boy and the religious strife and economic strife during that time. And it was just like so beautiful and moving, and again, transportive, which I crave in books. So yeah, I think lately that was one of the highlights.
Yeah, I still want to know if Mungo's okay.
I think so.
That was my first question. I do think he's okay.
So.
But after I finished reading that was my first thought. Is this kid okay? I realize I'm talking about a fictional character who does not exist, but that's how great this book is. And what I love talking to both of you is that you pull from so many different places, that it is ultimately about the story.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That's really important. The language that you use and your characters are fantastic, all of that, but ultimately it always comes back to story and what you can do with story. And I think that's really, really important for readers to understand. And I'm just hoping too that we're going to get some really great questions from the audience. So if you do have questions, because I have many, many more, but I'm really curious to see what you have to say. We have microphones set up in both aisles if you'd like to just line up and ask your questions. Rob and Victor would be really happy to take them, and I'm really happy to eavesdrop.
Hi, I have two questions. One very specific question for Victor, and then one more general question. The first question is when I hear a science fiction concept in dealing with sleeplessness, I wonder, is Nancy Kress's Beggars in Spain something lurking in the background? And the other is a question about the mentor-mentee thing. I'm not in a formal situation, but I managed to have talked myself into a situation where someone at a very high level has offered to look at my stuff. Like, how clean do I want to get it? How many levels do I want to like run this through before I take advantage of that? Any suggestions you can give me on how I want to work that situation? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. Nancy Kress's Beggars in Spain came out, I believe, in 1993. It won the Hugo Award for Best Novel. It's a masterwork of science fiction that I did not read until I finished The Sleepless, which was kind of a shocking moment for me because I was like, as a debut author, I'm like, oh, wow, somebody already wrote this story that I just wrote. Like, how do I deal with this? And, with mentors like Rob and other people who have told me, every story is going to be different. You're going to have the same premise, and you will tell it a different way just because you as a writer have a different point of view. The world where people don't sleep is a thing that has been explored by other writers as well. So I am aware of Beggars in Spain. I still have not read it. I just don't want to be influenced by it in any way. But I hear it's great. And as for your second question, it's the formal structure of mentor-mentee that Rob and I had is an anomaly. Most of the people that I know who get mentorship as a writer do it through informal networks, friends of friends, people who have been doing it slightly longer than others, try to pay it forward to someone who is less experienced. I think before I did Pitch Wars, I did have friends who are maybe a few years ahead of me, who I mostly corresponded with online in groups that I just met through writer events in New York, and then we corresponded online. That's really where it all started for me, and I believe for a lot of people. And I think if you just go to certain events and go online, there are a lot of forums, especially depending on what kind of writing you really want to do. They're out there, and the writing community is just super supportive in general in helping and nurturing up-and-coming or totally new writers.
Yeah, I would say you talked about like how clean it should be, like because you want to put your best foot forward. I would say be easy on yourself. I'm in a situation right now where this woman asked me to blurb her book, and super cool concept, and my plate's clear. I was like, yeah, sure, send it over. And then 2 days later, she sends me another copy. She's like, oh, I caught some typos and I fixed them. And then a couple of days later, she's like, oh, wait, no, read this version. And I'm like, dude, I don't care about typos. Like, if your story is okay, like, don't worry about editing it within an inch of its life. Like, just feel good about the story. If you were to come to me and say, hey, can you read my book? And you gave me a book and the story was great, the characters are great, it had a couple of typos, I'm not going to be like, no, you will never be published because you used a colon instead of a semicolon. How dare you? So I understand that impulse of wanting to put your best foot forward, but don't push yourself too hard. It's going to be okay.
Hello. I'm a writer too, and I actually participated in Pitch Wars a couple of years ago. It was a really cool experience. So I was wondering, what would you say are the important aspects of a relationship between a writer and their agent? Like, what should a writer look for?
Well, you want an agent who is very excited about what you're doing and just can't think of anything else they want to do than to get your book published. And there was a point, I had one agent and then she retired and then I got a new agent. And when I got my second agent, I told myself, like, I'm not going to be friends with my agent. It's a business relationship. And now we're buddies and we text each other all the time. We go out for dinner and we hang out. You just want to have a degree of trust. You want to be able to communicate with them clearly. You want them to be responsive. And you have to go into it understanding that you're not working for them. They're not your boss. A lot of people get really like hinky about agents and they're like, oh no, like I can't ask my agent this question. It's like, yes, you can. They're your agent. If you have a question, ask your agent the question and they should answer you. That's how it works. So I would say trust, clear communication, and just someone who's like really excited about wanting to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, everything Rob said, true, accurate, 100%. I would also add that you kind of want to get a sense of how editorial they are. When you submit your manuscript to an agent, they might say, oh, this is great, like we only need to do a few tweaks and then we can submit this to publishing houses. And that might work for you, that might be your style, but maybe you're looking for an agent who is more hands-on and in telling you, okay, I know this is good, this is at the best stage I can take it, but I still need someone to like amp it up a little bit more. And if that's someone you're looking for, then you want an agent who is known to be a little more hands-on in terms of giving editorial notes and maybe doing an edit round before submitting it to publishing houses. That differs for everybody. That differs for the stage of what stage your manuscript is in. Obviously, always put out your best version of the manuscript before sending it out to agents. But depending on your editorial style, that's something that you might want to think about when you're screening agents that you want to send it to.
Thank you. Also, I love Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, I mean, it's great.
Hi, I was also a Pitch Wars mentee this past year. My mentor was Clay Harmon, who was hanging out with Victor in Chicago, like yesterday,
Literally yesterday, hanging out with
which is
Clay, yeah.
You're a very busy man. So my questions are kind of in two buckets, and it might be a lot to answer however much y'all feel like. So first, I guess especially for Victor, you're writing like a also queer Filipino character. How do you deal with people thinking that like it's literally you and those are the decisions you would make? And then like for both of you, there are a lot of diverse characters in these books, and I was wondering, how do you deal with like people thinking that you think that that's what everyone of that identity or background is like? Do you like have sensitivity readers for that? With so many diverse characters, how do you like think about having that many sensitivity readers even? And then for more general writing craft, I was wondering like, what do your revision processes look like, especially with an eye towards making things fast-paced for a thriller mystery kind of thing?
Cool. So I get this question a lot, like how much of you is in Jamie? I would say obviously the identity is there, queer, Filipino, and all that. But I still do have to make a general disclaimer. Jamie is not me. He would make a lot of choices that I would not make. I think I'm more risk averse than Jamie is. I think he has, more tenacity than I do. But it's just something that I've learned to roll with. It's unavoidable. Everybody, well, not everybody. It's a common saying that every debut novel is autobiographical to some extent. I think that's true. It's not true in this case, but there is a lot of him in me. I just had to remind people, no, it's not me, but it's fine if you think it's me. You kind of just have to get used to that, especially if your character is in multiple intersections of marginalization. People are just going to assume that, and I've just learned to be comfortable with it. In terms of your second question, I do have sensitivity readers, but in terms of the burdens of representation, one thing that I always do is to make sure that I don't have just the one character representing a certain section of marginalization. The Sleepless has several queer characters, several non-white characters. It's a majority non-white cast. So you have several black people. So there are many different ways where I am able to kind of show the black experience or the Filipino experience or the queer bi pan experience because I have all these characters. So I don't run the risk of a reader saying, oh, you, Victor, think all bi people are this way. Well, no, because clearly I have multiple of them. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I do use sensitivity readers. Whenever I feel kind of, I'm sort of questioning something, I try to, show it to someone. Because, with as much thoughtfulness as I have going into this stuff, at the end of the day, I'm a white guy, and there are ways that, I'm just blind to my privilege. So I want to be really thoughtful about that. With Paradox, I actually had two friends who are trans read the book because the book has a trans character and her transness plays a role in the ending of the book. And so I went to them and I was like, hey, can you can I bounce this idea off you? And they were both, very caring about it. My friend Emma was very challenging, which I really appreciated because I didn't want to just be patted on the head and told I was a good little woke boy. And then my friend Alina read the book, and it was great because she sat me down and she's like, here's what you got right, and here's what you got wrong, and let's go over it. So, that was a really valuable experience for me. And in terms of editing, and revisions, we could have a very long conversation about this, but I will tell you the best thing that I've discovered in my process, which I've passed on to other people and they found really useful, do an entire edit of the book backwards. Start with the last chapter, then go through to the first. Because what'll happen is, as an editor, I see this all the time, where you've got all this fresh energy in the beginning of a book, and by the end of the book, it's kind of like, I just want this damn thing to be done. So if you take one revision and start with the last chapter and go through to the first, you put all that fresh energy into the ending, and it also really helps when you can see the plot structure out of order.
I still do it that way because you taught me that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I was wondering if either of you or both of you take any inspiration in your books from like the abundance of mythology and like different cultures and religions.
Not with The Sleepless, but I have a current project that's very Filipino, maybe too Filipino. It's gothic horror set in the Philippines, and it tackles toxic masculinity and dictators, because that's something that's ongoing with the Philippines right now. And there will be monsters, and there will be also religion, because religion is such a big part of the Philippines. For those who don't know, we are like 90% Catholic, and it kind of is interesting to see how folklore and religion mix and weave in the Filipino culture, and I wanted to explore those themes. So yeah, definitely influenced by it, definitely want to write about it, am writing about it now, and I think there's just so much there that so many stories that I still want to tell.
Yeah, Paradox had a lot of Buddhist and like Eastern philosophy in it, which was really exciting to me because I've always been fascinated by Buddhism. I've always been fascinated by quantum physics. And at one point was like, there's a lot of similarities here. And then I found this book called The Quantum and the Lotus, and I was like, oh, there are, and here are people who are much smarter than me talking about it, and this is helpful to me. So yeah, that's just a really fun place to play in.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in because, oh wait, hello person who has a question, then I'll jump in.
Hello. Is this on? Yeah, I just jumped up. Just three little questions. One, I was wondering if there's an actual torch being carried from a dangerous writing group that actually worked with Tom Spanbauer that still exists. Two, if you're willing, Rob, could you share like a memorable interaction or something that you learned directly from Tom Spanbauer? And then for both of you, I'm interested in knowing, I know you outline, I'm not sure if you do, I'm interested in knowing about the pivoting moment, if there is one, where you pivot from sort of outlining to hearing what your characters say and start writing dialogue. So those would be interesting.
My understanding is that Tom isn't really teaching these days because he's on the older end. His health isn't in the best place, which is incredibly sad. But it was a really emotional workshop because you're basically in his basement for 3 days, just like sitting around a table with a bunch of other people, and you're all terrified. And there were a lot of really beautiful, meaningful interactions there. I would say the one that I took away that has been useful for me both as a writer and sometimes as a person, especially given the state of the world, is he taught me that when two characters in a story touch, that it really means something, and that you have to really sort of unpack that moment. Because if you think about it, like, pre-pandemic, you'd go about your day and you'd pass hundreds and hundreds of people, but you're not really touching people. So like when you shake someone's hand, when you hug someone, like it means something, and touch means so much more now. Now that we've been deprived of it for so long. So that's something that just really resonates for me from that workshop. And then you want to jump on that other one?
Oh, yeah. So in terms of outlining, when I wrote The Sleepless, I did not outline. I did it as part of the National Novel Writing Month, so there wasn't really a lot of time for me to outline. But now I'm on writing my 4th book. I am a huge believer in outlines. I always make it a point that my outlines are no more than 3 levels deep, and every line is just like a line or a sentence. Once I start putting in like vibes or like dialogue, that's when I know, okay, I should stop outlining and just write the thing and just go with it. I think that's been a good guideline for me. Like if you can't put an outline point in like a phrase, then you're putting in too much. That should probably be on the page and not on your outline already. Thanks.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes.
Okay.
And I'm taking them because I have one more question.
Sure.
I wasn't kidding when I said I had a lot. Why do you write?
I literally can't imagine doing anything else. The idea of not writing to me is abhorrent. It's like, what would I do with my time? I'd probably take more naps and watch more movies. But, I've always been attracted to artistic expression. And actually, when I was a kid, I used to draw a lot. And I went to college for art and graphic design, and then nearly failed out my first semester because I learned this is not the thing for me to be doing. And for some reason, it just I was lucky enough to realize writing though, writing could work. Let's try this. And then I fell into it, and I was like, oh, I'm home now.
I love stories. Stories help me understand the world, help me connect with people, and I've always been an avid reader, and at one point I just had all these feelings and ideas that I wanted to share, and I thought, well, I could do that in my day job as a lawyer, I suppose, but I could also try my hand at writing stories, and when I did, it just felt so natural and still does, and my sense was, why haven't I been doing this all this time? I could have been doing this since forever. There's a little bit of regret about starting a little bit late, but now that I'm in it, I'm like, yes, this is the only thing that I want to do. And I want to keep doing it, especially as a Filipino, as a queer person, writing in sci-fi, writing in mysteries. I feel like there's a specific kind of story that needs to be told, and I want to tell those stories.
Regret is overrated.
I know, people keep
super
telling
overrated,
me.
Regret
I'm
is so
still learning
overrated.
that. I'm still learning.
Okay, I'm just glad you're both here. I want to thank both Rob Hart, Victor Manebo. If you would like more time with both of these gentlemen, there's a book signing in the lower level in Hall C. Please go hang out with them. I have been able to hog them all morning, so I'm delighted. But I'm going to hand them over now because you really do want more time with these. Thank you also to the Library of Congress for getting us all back out into the world, because there's nothing better than being around a bunch of book lovers.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And if anyone picks up a copy of Paradox, I have Paradox Hotel key cards to give away. So I will give them away until supplies run out.